Hey, well, thank you so much, all of you that have joined. And my name is Haley Figueroa with the DPS Substance Use Prevention Team. We are really excited about our speakers today. Just a couple of logistics first is we do have interpretation here. So let me just turn it over to Ruth for a second and you can let people know how to get hooked up with interpretation.
Yes, thank you so much. Hola, muy buenos días a todos, todas, todes. Yo soy Ruth, estoy aquí como intérprete del distrito y el día de hoy vamos a estar proveyendo el servicio de interpretación simultánea. Cuando enciendan la interpretación, ustedes van a ver en la parte baja de su pantalla el icono del globo terráqueo. Ahí pueden hacerle clic, van a ver los idiomas inglés y español, pueden elegir el idioma que más les guste y ahí vamos a estar interpretando. Si en algún momento hay algún problema, no pueden escuchar, pueden mandar un mensaje en la cajita del chat para dejarnos saber. Y si van a estar hablando y participando el día de hoy, solo quiero recordarles de hablar a un ritmo cómodo para poder interpretar todo lo que se está diciendo. So once again, I'm Ruth with the district. We'll be interpreting simultaneously today. Once we turn on interpretation, you will see the icon of the globe at the bottom of the screen. From there, you can select your preferred language. If you are speaking and participating today, I just want to remind you to speak at a conversational pace, just to make sure I have enough time to interpret everything that is being said. And that is it. Gracias. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to work on getting that interpretation going. The globe's not showing up in the bottom now, but we will figure that out here in just a second. Wanted to let you know there's going to be an opportunity to ask some questions at the end of our presentation at the Q&A button in the bottom. We will also be recording this presentation. We are going to be sharing it out via email, as well as posting it on our website, dpsprevention.org. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Angelica Ochoa, who works with a community partner, Rise Above Colorado. She's the Youth Engagement Coordinator and the lead facilitator of Denver Organizing Committee. She's a DPS alumni from South High School and a recent graduate in 2016. We also have Talon Sheffman, who is 17 years old. His favorite things to do are biking and skiing. He started his dive into public health 2 years ago as a part of the Providers and Teens Communicating for Health, which spreads awareness about patient rights for teens. He's on the Denver Organizing Committee as well. So welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for being here. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Haley. I will go ahead and share my screen with everyone. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I always struggle to share my screen. Okay, perfect. So this is our presentation. I can have Tom go ahead and introduce, and we'll kind of share a little bit about ourselves.
Of course. So, hi everyone. My name's Tom. I'm a current junior at South High School. Thank you so much for that introduction, Haley. It was pretty much covered everything, but I'm just really excited to share some things that I've learned as a part of the Denver Organizing Committee over the past year or so, and just kind of the things I've learned in general.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll be focusing on healthy youth and adult relationships and really diving into identities, rights, and realities. And I kind of have these 4 groups that make up the Denver Organizing Committee on the screen right here. And we will just go into that a little more on the next slide.
So yeah, as we talked about, we're part of the Denver Organizing Committee, which is a committee that encompasses a bunch of different teen groups that work with teens through healthcare and such to kind of help expand the knowledge of teens in order to kind of do better, with becoming young adults. So Denver Organizing Committee is kind of a connection between all of them. And so in our presentation today, we're going to kind of go over some of the main things that all of our groups share in common. Personally, I'm from Patch, that second one. And so we're just going to go over all the good stuff that we learned.
Yeah, and just to touch on the other groups that kind of make up our committee and helped us build this presentation out that we're sharing with you today. We have I for Prevention, which is youth who have lived experiences with struggles either with substance misuse or mental health. And they are housed within Denver Health, as well as the Youth Pride Coalition, which is a group of youth who identify as LGBTQ+, and they work to also empower youth and kind of share similar information. And then we have the Rise Above Colorado Teen Action Council. And this is a group of youth who really focuses more on the substance misuse side, and changing perceptions towards positive norms. So you'll see a little bit of information from all of the different councils as we move through our presentation. I can sort of start with this one. We wanted to share these 6 principles of positive youth development, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. But this is really a grounding place for all of our groups where we try to operate from, connecting with our youth members and also allowing them to really showcase all of their skills. And we also believe that they are things that can be implemented into any relationship, whether it's like a parent and child relationship, any sort of way that you work with youth, really focusing on the inherent qualities that youth have. And yeah, they're really kind of the basis of all of our groups. So a really good place to start from to understand where we think this information that we're sharing is really important and where it's kind of coming from. I'm not going to read them all. I feel like you can just kind of take a look at them. I don't want to read the screen to you guys, but that's where we have a basis from. And so we will go on.
So let's just jump right into it. So the first thing we want to talk about is identities. So as a team, we obviously have our own identity, but that identity is changing a lot as we're growing up, gaining new experiences and kind of becoming an adult. And so we kind of want to think about why is our identity so important to us? So it's important to recognize that differences between youth and adult and how we're kind of in that transitional phase and the difficulties that can come with that. It's important to understand that people's identities should be respected, and that's kind of the best way to interact with people is through understanding their identities and being able to meet people who share that same identity with you kind of allows for a lot of great things to happen, because it kind of stops a lot of the tensions that may happen between people who aren't necessarily on the same page all the time.
Yeah, and I think we did want to kind of open this up to any input. These are kind of what we came up with, and our group of youth members shared why they feel it's so important to them. And just kind of the question, I think there's a Q&A button going, so it could go in there, or if you wanted to unmute or share in the chat, just like why you find this to be an important factor in developing these healthy relationships. Also, no pressure, kind of like on the fly question, but just something to keep in mind as a question that we're posing to the group as we move through this, to be thinking about how it's important to you in your work and kind of like you specifically and the youth you work with. So kind of diving into a little bit about how these can be further developed, and how understanding identity can build both community and just overall increased self-perception. So we kind of start off here talking about expanding communities through identity. I think it's really important to first kind of define community. Can be really helpful when we're talking about a youth and adult relationship. I think that sometimes we can't, like, we're not coming at the conversation from the same place. You might think of your community as like a very specific thing, but being able to expand that definition and also work through it together to find out what the young people that we're working with do think of as their community and how we can help them kind of dive into those communities can be a really helpful place to start. And I also just saw, sorry, that we were asking for people to dive into the chat because that is not possible. Yeah, Tom,
Yeah.
sorry, to the second
Yeah,
one.
sorry. So then after, you've kind of defined that community and those people around you, it's important to understand your own identity and how we see ourselves and how our identity is shaped by not only the experiences we have ourselves, but the people who are around, the connections we've made with that community. And, kind of by identifying that identity and being able to really fully understand what your personal self is, it lets you kind of look for those similar traits in others around you, or look for whatever you're trying to look for when you have that internal truth.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. And then kind of combining those first two steps, right? So once you have been able to, for yourself and the youth you work with individually or within the groups, thinking about personal identity, group identity, and communities, connecting with the communities that can provide the best representation for the youth we're working with. And this can increase feelings of safety and support and just kind of increase the outcomes that we're looking for in general, by allowing people to work with people that kind of have an understanding of their background. And so we talk about this a lot with like our group with Eye for Prevention, who specifically works with youth who have lived experience, being able to share that with someone where they feel like they know the same lived experience can be really helpful, and build a lot of trust in these relationships. So that's why we're highlighting this as a really important part in doing that.
Yeah, and then kind of onto that fourth point, it's not just about getting a community that helps you like have that safety net, but it also helps you expand, being in that community. It gives you that safe pace to kind of almost as like a base to grow off of and to try new things and to expand your identity. And finding that community allows those kind of things to happen. So giving that base that and I talked about, and it can be that like support group that a lot of people need. And it's important because it's hard to kind of like throw yourself out there, but when you have those people behind you, that community to help you through things, to kind of tell you can do this, it makes it infinitely easier to accomplish your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, whatever, anything new you want to do.
Great. And then we just wanted to share, when we share out the presentation with you all afterwards, these links will be available to you, but just a couple different activities or resources to look into in developing or in trying to develop these connections and understanding of identity. So one activity that we really love is the Paseo Circles of Identity, which is kind of a concentric circles that focuses on first diving inwards a little bit and looking at your own identity, and thinking about that for yourself. And the activity can be stopped there if it's sort of an individual activity and really just for some self-reflection. But there's also some great outlines for questions to do this in a group, and explore identity in that way. They are all pretty easily tailored to your specific group. So this one's a great way to do some initial get to know you with groups, with a group that's already pretty established. It's also a great way to dive a little bit deeper into some conversations that might be just have a little bit more depth and ask some things about identity that maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable to talk about, but once the conversation gets going, I think that it can be really helpful in kind of understanding how we are similar and different. And then below that, we also have linked the Youth Pride Coalition toolkit. And this toolkit was created by youth and adults specifically aimed at adults who work with queer youth. And it's meant to provide a more informed, compassionate, and affirming support. There's kind of three parts to it. There is specifically within there resources to direct youth to, for them to connect with, and kind of like dive into those in the last slide, how we mentioned the best representative groups for them, if that's something that you're looking for. And then there's also some best practices information. So a lot of really good stuff to look through if that is an area of work that you have. And then the last bullet we have there is just our different group social media accounts. In terms of connection, this is an area where we do post a lot of opportunities to attend an event for, within the school communities or within different communities that they might find themselves identifying with. Just making the connection and having this sort of positive outlet. I feel like social media has been and is moving towards a place of maybe not being the best reach for youth, just because of the other things that do come from social media. But these are some places that are really highlighting positive things and can be positive, since a lot of youth are accessing social media anyway. We encourage some positive things on those pages. And then, perfect. Well, moving into our next sort of section, which is talking about rights.
So just quickly before we get there, I noticed that someone put in the Q&A where they were wondering, as a parent, how can we encourage our kids to find their community? And so I would say, first of all, one big thing is that as a parent, I think you should try and be a part of your kids' community at the start, because like I heard you talk about, once you have that initial community, it's a lot easier for people to kind of branch out and go into their own areas and go explore new things and things. So I think first and foremost, it's all about being that like rock that your kids can always come back to kind of like give them that jumping ground to go try out new things. But second of all, I think one of the main things and one of the hardest things I think anyone or any parent would want to do is you kind of got to just let kids go. I know I can speak from experience with my parents. There have been things I've wanted to try, and it kind of gets hard to do that because our parents are maybe not the most on board with, oh, you want to go and drive to Utah to go do a random basketball tournament or something. And so I think just giving that openness, kind of letting these kids like try out these things and not necessarily putting those thoughts in their head that, oh, that's not a good idea, because I think when you do that, it kind of creates a stereotype in their mind that, oh, doing these kind of more over the top things isn't necessarily a good thing to do. And then that kind of restricts what people actually want to do. So I would say that if you had to think of two things, first, be willing to support anything your kid wants to do. And second, be willing to let them actually go out and try new things without judgment. I hope that answers your question. And so now moving on to health rights. So as a patch educator, health is pretty important for what we do. We focus a lot on kind of teaching kids their own health rights, what they're allowed to do. And so again, we'll open it up. We can't use the chat, but if anyone likes to unmute what they think is important in health right, feel free to shout that out, but I'll just go over a couple quickly. I think it's important because we're going into adulthood, and there's a lot of things that are going to happen in adulthood. We're going to have to take care of our own insurance. We're going to have to take care of our own healthcare, and starting younger while we still have a support network that can help us if we make mistakes is just going to make it infinitely easier for that future. It allows us to kind of take charge of things we want as a kid without that fear of being ostracized by people around us or whatever, because of different rules or confidentiality that we can have. It ensures that there's that credible truth being spread when we ourselves are getting information from healthcare providers and such, instead of just someone on Instagram saying something. And so I think there's all of these great important things of healthcare, but if anyone else has anything, if you want to put it in that Q&A area. Give it a couple more seconds. There's no pressure.
And if it does come up later, we can definitely pause to answer anything that comes into the chat. So feel free to think on it again and
Yeah.
drop it in if it feels right.
Yep. And of course, put any questions you have in the Q&A section, and we'll try and answer them at the end of the section. So moving forward. So we wanted to talk, kind of give this out. It may be a little hard with the virtual, but we wanted to kind of give these ideas where there's a lot of things in healthcare and stuff that a lot of people don't necessarily know. So we wanted to kind of ask the group, what do you think, are these questions true or false? So I think, I'm not sure, actually, no, I don't believe we can use reactions, but I was thinking, for the first one, parents or guardians get to make all healthcare decisions until a child is 18 years old. For anyone who believes that is true, do you guys want to use the raise hand feature? And then anyone who believes it's false, just keep your hand down. All right, I'm seeing a couple hands raised, though mostly not raised. All right. And then so it's actually false. Not every healthcare decision does get to be made by the parents. There are certain things, namely with contraceptives and birth control and STI testing, where kids are allowed to make those choices themselves. You can go, for example, to a nearby Denver Health Clinic, and you can get confidential contraceptive treatments, which will it won't necessarily be told to the parent, and that's completely up to the kid. And then there's also the idea that at most doctor visits, I believe starting at the age 12, doctors try to have one-on-one time with the child themselves, just so that they can get different sides of the story from the kid that may not be wanting to be shared with the parent, so that they can give different health care depending on if that's needed. All right, you want to do the next one, Angelica?
Yeah, so our next question is healthcare providers discuss everything shared in a visit with parents and guardians until the patient is over 18 years old. We can kind of just do the same, raise hand for true, don't raise your hand for false. I saw a couple hands, and yeah, I think Talon touched on this a little bit in the last one, but this one is also false. There, again, we'll get into this in our next couple slides, but there are multiple different scenarios where youth have the ability to access healthcare completely confidential from their parents, so it doesn't have to be shared in a visit or post-visit, even with minors. And then I'll let you do the next one, Talon.
Yeah, and then just quickly adding on that last one, so there are quite a few things that don't necessarily have to be shared by the doctors, but there are ways that these things can sometimes be found. And main thing is the explanation of benefits you can get on your insurance, sometimes for certain confidential treatments. Because if the kid uses your insurance, those things may pop up on the explanation of benefits. And so there are a lot of things confidential, but it's important to kind of understand that this isn't a perfect system, and there are, a couple loopholes here and there that can let parents see. And so it's important for kids to know that, and, maybe try and find other avenues to work through things or anything else like that. So moving on to the third question now. So if a teen tries to get help with substance misuse, a parent or guardian will be notified. So will police, since substance use is illegal. So just raise your hand if you believe that to be true, and leave it down if you think it's false. All right. So it seems, yeah, I'm gonna say I think everyone got this one. It is false. Healthcare is something that's supposed to help people, and getting them involved with parents and then putting them in jail isn't going to help. So teens are able to get confidential care when it comes to substance misuse, and they can get help. One thing main that comes to mind is the STEP program, which helps teens who are using substances to try and work on that, but parents don't necessarily have to be notified, and the police will not be called on someone for trying to get help.
And then our last one here, if a teen wants to see a therapist, a parent or guardian must be involved. We can do a quick raise of hand if you think this is true, and then not raise your hand if you think this is false. I'm gonna say, okay. So a couple hands. There is a little bit of a trend you may have noticed in all of our questions. This one is also false. The youth after the age of 12 are able to access mental health care without a parent or guardian consent. It's going to come back to the same thing that Talon mentioned last time with insurance and those sort of things kind of being the caveat to that. So there are ways, and there are ways, even if a child does have insurance, to potentially not use the insurance through some different programs through the state that we will also talk about later. I'm gonna go on to the next slide.
All right, so yeah, as we talked about a lot, teens have a lot of rights, especially to confidentiality, including sexual reproductive health care. That's kind of the things I talked about earlier, where it was contraceptives, but it can also be on things like pregnancy testing, STI treatments, and vaccines for certain STIs. So, sorry, what's it? Excuse me. Teens are able to get these things because, at least in my heart, I believe that it's important for us to kind of give these things out to teens because it lets them first get that education on them. It gives them the responsibility to take care of their own healthcare, and it kind of takes off that burden that, oh my God, if I like do something, my parents watching over my shoulder, trying to make sure I don't do anything bad. It lets kids work on their independence, and that's important. And so that's one of the big things, but also the other thing we want to talk about was mental health care. So I think a lot of people know that mental health has definitely been a crisis, you could say, in high school students currently, just because of the stress of school and the kind of increasing competition around college and stuff, and that whole stereotypical idea that everyone who's successful had to go to college. And so what that what mental health care is it lets these kids get that therapy like we talked about on that last slide. It lets them work on themselves and kind of define what they want to do in life, because again, we're teenagers, we're going through all these hormones, we get confused about this and that, and it can be hard for us to focus on a certain goal or kind of see through that haze of our future and see what we kind of want to begin working on. And so mental health can help us take care of that while also reducing that stress we just get from the world we live in. And so this just kind of goes a little bit more into details. So specifically on confidentiality for sexual things, everything that is funded by the federal government through Title X has to be confidential, and a parent can only view it legally with a child's written consent. And so that's just effectively saying, this is just trying to go a little bit more into detail on what exactly a child has to do to give their parent consent. And it can kind of be that idea that like kids know now that like they have to like very specifically say what they get to see. And then again, kind of goes back to the idea that we're talking about, the, that kind of freedom of the burden of having your parents watch over your shoulders. And then according to the University of Michigan Medicine, in Colorado, I know it's a Michigan study for Colorado, which is kind of funny, but providers cannot disclose anything regarding preventative care or STI treatment if the patient is over 14. So obviously that's pretty self-explanatory. And again, less the provide or the patient themselves discloses it, parents can't find it. And then we kind of just talked quickly about the explanation of benefits thing at the bottom there. So yeah, that's just kind of a little bit more in depth on exactly what the problems with healthcare and what is confidential, what can get leaked, kind of things like that.
Yeah, and we just really like to share this information to be empowering for youth as well as adults to kind of know, these things that, sorry, I clicked to the next slide, are available for youth. And this is all state law. We do think it's really important to establish these relationships with parents and kind of share this information, to have an open communication among parents and their child, among these teens and young people and their trusted adults in their lives, but really important and can be empowering for parents as well to know what is the law and how these things are working outside of what might be this healthy relationship that we're trying to establish, and kind of can be used to further that trust by sharing this information with the young people that you have in your lives, to really just make sure that they know their rights and that they also know that they can talk to you about these important things. Denver Health is located in a lot of schools. We have here in the middle the Denver Health school-based health centers, where teens can access these different resources. And they're also encouraged in these places to have conversations with their trusted adults and parents about these things that they feel comfortable, and feel that it's a safe place to do so. And so on this page, we also just kind of have some different resources where youth can access health information. So Patch, which Talon is a part of and has been sharing a lot of really great information from that he's learned there. They do peer-to-peer resources, peer-to-peer trainings, which is something if you're kind of in a setting where you have a group of youth, that is something that they're able to do to share this information. Someone like Talon could come and share with your group of youth and talk about all of this stuff with them. The I Matter program, in terms of thinking about mental health care, is a resource that's available and free and confidential. There is the health insurance part that also plays into that. We have here on the right the Rise Above Colorado youth-facing website that has information on specific substances. So honest and accurate information about these substances, so that if there is a curiosity, youth have the opportunity to learn more. And then there's also some pages about different topics that youth might just be curious about or struggling with, such as stress or bad habits. They're created by Youth for Youth, so they are meant to serve as a way for them to connect and learn more about their health. And then we also have an image from on the lower right, strongerwithout.com, which is the I for Prevention website, and is a hub of a lot of resources for anyone who might be struggling with substance misuse or mental health issues, for them to go and find some information there. I do see this question in the chat about parents' insurance being used. Yeah, so this would be on an explanation of benefits, it would show up and be sent to the parents. There are, when a child is filling out an I Matter application to receive mental health support, there is the option to fill in insurance information or to not fill in insurance information. So concerning confidentiality, it's not going to say what was talked about in the appointment or really what was done. But it will say that there was the appointment. And then when it comes to stuff like STI treatment or pregnancy testing or anything like that, an explanation of benefits would break all of that down. So kind of that it is a confusing bit of like confidentiality, because like no provider is going to say what happened in the visit, but it would show up on an explanation of benefits.
Right. And it kind of gets a little fuzzy with the insurance because obviously we're teenagers, we're not rolling in it per se. So we usually do need to use some sort of payment for paid things, but for most STI treatments, at least for the school-based health centers that we have, around Denver right now, for teenagers, it's free to get certain types of contraceptives and stuff. And Angelica, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you don't need to put down any insurance information for that since it's free. And so those kinds of visits would be completely confidential.
Yeah, so I know like with accessing the clinics, you don't need that information. I am not 100% sure on the rules of accessing the clinics. I know that they're open to any DPS students, regardless of whether the clinic is housed in your school or if you're accessing from an outside school. But since they are free, yeah, you won't have to provide that, or that explanation of benefits wouldn't be provided.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to, or sorry, you go.
No, go ahead, Tom.
All right. I just wanted to respond to the other question concerned on teen suicide rate. So I am not entirely sure on every class, but I know that I believe starting in 6th grade, you're required to have sex ed. And then at least at my high school currently, we have health courses available for anyone to take and things like that. Particularly on the idea of suicide, middle school was a little bit ago, so I don't entirely remember everything that went on there, but I know at high school right now, we usually have some sort of seminar or something, probably once a semester going over that. We have, I'm forgetting the name of the movement, but they tell you how to check on your friends and to locate most signs of depression and then how to bring that up and kind of ideas and solutions for the problems you see there. And so that's kind of the main thing that I think we do in high school right now is we use that to kind of have like all of your friends be educated so that if they see those signs in you, they can notice and then bring them to people who are qualified to help. I hope that answers your question.
And I just also want to say I am not an expert in that area by any means. The thing that comes to mind is, again, like these connections with community. And I do know that Sources of Strength is a community program, school program that is present in some DPS schools that does focus on suicide prevention through different sort of upstream prevention. So just more, again, like community building, sort of these things to address it at a higher level, not really like post, more pre, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's kind of where I would go with that, is just reaching back into the community for those things. And I think even my experience gets even less when it goes to elementary school kids. So sorry that we can't answer that question too fully.
I do have a few thoughts too, and Angelica and Talon, that was a great overview and presentation. So DPS does have signs of suicide, so a suicide prevention effort that happens in all of our schools at 5th grade, 6th grade, 9th grade, and 12th grade. So every student in DPS will receive that suicide prevention programming. And then to answer the question about health, your comments were exactly right on. We do have a health class that is mandated for high schools. So every high school student in Colorado, it's through CDE, takes 1 semester of health, where they're getting a lot of this content as well. And then I know there's also a CDE requirement for elementary and middle schools around health, but I can't remember exactly how many minutes it is. I just did a quick Google on CDE and it has the standards and all the things that are to be taught related to that. And then I think Talon was mentioning, we also have Safe to Tell, which is a anonymous reporting system where students can ask for help for their friends in an anonymous way. But I think you guys hit all of the other ones. And then you were right on Halika, Denver Health. We have 19 school-based health centers in DPS schools that can be accessed by any students in DPS, regardless of what school they go to. So right on.
And sorry, I know we kind of jumped right into the chat, but we do have a couple more slides if that's okay to just wrap up with here. All right.
So the last one we want to talk about, and again, if anyone has any additions for this, is we want to talk about realities. And there's a lot of stuff going around on, all teenagers are on drugs and all teenagers drink alcohol and things. And while there are the teens who do, it's important to understand that that's not everyone. And this kind of section is going to be about what is really going on with teens and looking at that perspective. So why is this important? First of all, this perspective can mean a lot. It's important to understand as parents, talking to my own parents, they read the news and see all about these people who are dying of fentanyl overdoses. And, I get to talk probably once a week. Hey, don't do drugs. Hey, that's bad. And it's important to understand that, that's not the main thing that goes on. But if you look at, suicide rates and depressions in teens, that's a big thing that maybe isn't necessarily talked about as much as, all teens are on drugs. And so kind of getting that correct reality allows parents and guardians and people around these teens to help them with the things that are really affecting teenagers.
Great. Yeah. And again, just feel free to throw into the chat. We'll just keep moving forward. But if anything comes up for you about why you think this is important, you can throw it, into the Q&A, not the chat.
Yeah. So a really big one we kind of wanted to say is that most high school teens in Colorado haven't used alcohol or drugs in the last month. Looking at news and stuff, that doesn't seem like a true statement. It seems, completely wrong, but it's actually correct. And so it's important this is just kind of our example here, but there's a lot of statistics like this where it's saying that this is the problem. This isn't the main problem. And I think Angelica will go into some more statistics on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is some information from the Rise Above Colorado youth survey that goes out. And so this information in the past 30 days, the percentage of Colorado teens who consumed alcohol, used vaping products, used marijuana, or used prescription drugs. And the percentage is listed there. And so this is really important to talk about. Like Talon mentioned, these are really important things that we do want to raise the concern that is there and acknowledge this concern. But we also want to balance that with the hope and reality that most youth are not using, and really kind of defining this in our relationships with young people, as a parent or a teacher or whatever it is, that elevating this hope, elevating the idea that most kids are abstaining, that these positive things are happening, can really change the norms that are felt by adults and the youth themselves, which in turn can cause these numbers to climb even higher, right? That more youth won't use, knowing that it's the norm to not use. I think it can be perpetuated by a variety of different things in the media, as Talon mentioned, what you might just have been told from your parents, what you might have seen in a smaller group, more concentrated group. But when we look across Colorado teens and really just national data as well, the truth is that most teens don't use. And so we really like to elevate that to further kind of build this trust and use the data that we do have to build a foundation that makes us feel a little bit more steady in finding boundaries, giving freedoms, and different things like that. And as we share this information, I do just want to highlight that there is a contest going on at Rise Above Colorado. We do a Fill Your World with Good contest to help youth kind of elevate this for themselves, to show us what they're doing that does fill their world with good and is them engaging in things that are for their betterment, for community betterment, and are them not using substances to kind of change that narrative that some of us may have thought prior. And within DPS, the school that has the most submissions will get a free mural at their school. This happened last year as well, and Maury Middle School won and got a free mural there. So just a way to kind of promote this hope to change the narrative, to uplift the good things that are happening and recognize the good things that are happening. Just wanted to share out as a possibility for you to know about in your school community and share with the young people you work with. And yeah, so that kind of wraps us up, just thinking about the identities, rights, and realities to kind of bring together this foundation for building healthy relationships. We do have some discussion questions, and again, just want to open up to any more Q&A. And then I know Haley just put in the chat, and I have another survey if there's time to fill out. Everyone loves all their surveys that they have to fill out, so I can put that in the chat as well. But any questions, and then we'll have some questions for you guys, but just want to first ask if anyone has anything they'd like to ask from the presentation.
I just want to make one comment, Angelica and Talon. This has just been amazing. I've learned so much about kind of what are teens' rights and just really some things that I didn't know. And when I did just get a message from one of our Denver health providers also that just wanted to reiterate, obviously we know parents and trusted adults kind of are that first line of contact. And obviously we want kids to be using those supports. In addition to, yeah, really understanding all the pieces you're putting forward about how they can access support directly there through the Denver Health Clinic. So just want to add that one more piece of context.
Yeah, and I quickly wanted to mention, I made a little mistake when I was talking about confidentiality, but confidentiality is a state law here. It's not just a part of Denver Health and those clinics. That was just an example. So I just wanted to clarify that. But anywhere around the state, teens are able to get those things. And like I said, the Title X care. So anything that's federally funded has that. And just all across the state in Colorado, everything is confidential for teens. So yeah, if anyone has a question, if you also, if anyone wants to raise their hand, I can let you talk if you want to ask it out loud or use the Q&A function.
And I just posted through the first discussion question that we have, if this helps prompt anyone, if there are any challenges that you can foresee in implementing any of these tools, like working towards empowerment, towards building healthy and trusted relationships, just kind of to talk about as a group. And I think I'll actually go ahead and just kind of highlight we have 3 questions here to just kind of think about in case anything comes up with anyone with these different questions that we have.
Well, if nobody has anything else, I think we'll just say, thank you so much for the time you gave us, and thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you so much. And I will put in the chat as well this link, because I know QR codes weren't made for computers, but I still always put them in my presentations.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Angelica and Talon. And we really appreciate everybody attending today. And yep, look for that recording and email will come from Leah on our team through your email. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.